scripture reading today will come from James chapter 1, verse 27. James chapter 1, verse 27. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world.
Good morning, everyone. Did I turn my mic back on okay? Can you hear me? All right. Well, if you could bring my lesson up, we'll get started. Until he does that, I'll go ahead and just make a few comments. If you weren't able to join us for Bible class, we have a couple bookmarks that we would love to provide you that would give you an opportunity to follow AGAPE in North Carolina and the things that we're doing. And so if you would, just get with me or Kimberly. Kim, where are you at? Okay, this is Kimberly Scott. She is our executive director of AGAPE in North Carolina, and we're both going to be joining you for lunch today. So we'll have an opportunity to talk to you about any questions you may have about AGAPE. So, what is AGAPE and what do we do? Our purpose is to make a difference in the lives of children that are truly in distress. Children who have been either abandoned or children who have been taken away from their parents for various reasons. We are a Christian-based program based on faith, compassion, and a ministry dedicated to those two principles. We are responsible, we have Christian integrity, and we are driven by faith and God-given talents. We're going to talk about talents in a few minutes. As I said, that's Kimberly. We currently have 11 board members. Actually, I think we're closer to 8 right now because we lost a couple. They rotate off every so often. And we have field staff, social workers all over the place and throughout the state. And we also do counseling services. So why is AGAPE needed? Over 1 million divorces in the United States every year. As for those of you who are with me, during the Bible class, you learned that I was a JRTC instructor, and I have a lot of high school students who live in single homes because of divorce. 1.5 million abortions each year in the United States. We do not honor, we do not care for the children that we have, and we often kill the children who are in the womb. Over 100,000 cases of abuse reported in North Carolina each year. 100,000, believe it. Illegitimate births at an all-time high. At Bunker Hill, where I teach, at any one point in time, I can see about 3 to 5 young ladies walking around the hall who are pregnant and ready to give birth. Poverty rate at an all-time high. And in general, families are hurting and struggling. And we in AGAPE are here to help support those families. So, we're going to talk a little bit this morning about the parable of the Good Samaritan. Who's your neighbor? Well, we usually think of our neighbor as the person next door to us. But I would like you to expand your thought processes, and I'm sure you probably already have, to think about a neighbor as anybody who is in need. It is important for us to love others, obviously. The Jews felt that they were better than the Samaritans and had little, if anything, to do with these people. The Jewish Samaritan theology was very similar. They both believed that they were the true worshipers of God. They both placed supreme importance on the first part of the Old Testament, and they both looked to the Messiah. The Samaritans expected him to rule from Mount Gerizim, and the Jews from Jerusalem. The Samaritans insisted that Mount Gerizim was the only true central sanctuary for all Israel, as we talked about, and they believed Moses took a place above normal. And the Samaritans and the Jews basically had many of the same beliefs. final judgment, rewards, punishments, circumcision, Sabbath, dietary laws, and the ceremonial and judicial laws. But there were enough differences that the Jews truly did not have much respect for the Samaritans. In fact, they disliked them so much that when the Jews traveled from Jerusalem to Galilee, they would take the long way around the Jordan Valley rather than travel through Samaria. Lessons learned. Our differences often contribute to us as individuals overlooking others who are in need. We often take care of our families, but we often don't take care of those who we don't consider to be our families. And sometimes even our families don't take care of our families. I remember my dad was deserted from his biological father when he was 3, and my grandmother, she ended up being okay, but she had a lot of psychological issues back then, and the family couldn't decide what to do with my dad, and so they just put him in an orphanage. They didn't take care of him. But the good news is Christians have the advantage of Jesus' teaching, so we know better than to be like the Jews and more like the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan, Luke 10, 25 through 37, which is where it is found. And Jesus told many stories or parables to help people learn the truth. And in verse 25, it reads, "And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, 'Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?' And he said to him, 'What is written in the law? What is your reading of it?' So he answered and said, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself.' And he said to him, 'You have answered rightly, so do this and you will live.' But he wanted to justify himself and said to Jesus, 'Who is my neighbor?' And then Jesus answered and said, 'A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. On the next day when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend when I come again, I will repay you.' So which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves?" And he said, "He who showed mercy on him." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." So that's what we're talking about. Who is my neighbor? The Pharisees did not consider any Jews or anybody who was not a Jew their neighbor. In our society, people often see different countries and different races and don't consider them their neighbor. But I would like to suggest to you that Jesus' definition of a neighbor makes every person in the world our neighbor. God's concept of a neighbor includes everyone. Anyone who needs our help is our neighbor. And how often do we decide to pass by? So how do we prepare ourselves to be a good Samaritan? I would like to suggest to you that being a good Samaritan is not something you just do without being prepared. You have to make a conscious decision that this is something you want to do. You have to make a conscious decision that this is part of your Christianity, something part of your service to the Lord. So prepare yourself and follow your talents and your passions. Now, my sister Wendy loves to work with certain age groups. She likes to work with the elderly. She is marvelous at it. She probably wouldn't prefer to work with the young kids like I do. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy teaching JRTC. The kids are, for those of you who are not familiar with the program, it's a military program in the high schools, and the kids are a lot of fun. I get to give them a lot of direction. I get to do, in fact, I just love giving them push-ups. They come in, we have a little game in JRTC. They come into the classroom and 10 minutes will go by and one of them will comment about my bald head. And then I'll take them right out into the hall and every single one of them has to do push-ups. It's a game. And they're a lot of fun, but they can be very frustrating at times. And sometimes they just do dumb things, and I love putting them back on the right path. And sometimes they listen, and sometimes they don't. But that's one of my talents, working with that age group. And you need to decide what your talent is. And you need to be working as a good Samaritan where that talent is. And when you find that you are using your talents for the Lord, you will find that you will become a leader in that area. You will be a leader, which is simply defined as leadership is to give direction to others who follow your example. And some of our best leaders in AGAPE are our parents, who are foster parents. Is that not right, Kim? It is, isn't it? They are out there advocating for us. They are out there talking to other parents about becoming foster parents, or maybe becoming adopted parents, or maybe giving to AGAPE, or maybe becoming respite care parents, or I can go on forever. They are out there leading. And you know who is a leader? These two people are a leader. This is my mom and dad. They are in their late 70s right now. And you know why they're a leader? Because when I was 18 years old, they went out and they went and adopted a little 3-year-old girl from Korea. We thought she was 4 at that point, but she turned out to be 3. We have no idea what her birthday is. There's no records that came with her. We picked her adoption date as her birthday. But why are they a leader? I'll tell you why they're a leader, because we as their children follow their example. And right now, if you look in that picture, you won't see everybody because there's a couple pregnancies in there. There's 15 grandchildren in there, and only 6 of them are biological. How many of those parents, or how many of those kids were impacted by the decision of my parents going back and adopting that 3-year-old kid? There were quite a few. They provided leadership. Being a good Samaritan is an incredibly high standard. Loving our neighbor takes a lot of commitment. We're often self-righteous because we use the wrong standard. We use our own needs versus the needs of that person who is in need. It's hard to live or love somebody who is unlovable. That's why it's an intellectual decision and not an emotional decision. I guarantee you there's many, many times that my wife has to intellectually decide to love me. It's true. And it's true for all you husbands and wives out there. Your wife or your husband often have to make the intellectual decision to love you. Mercy. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about the Good Samaritan. Be merciful, just as your Father in heaven is merciful. And it's a positive action. Matthew 7 and verse 12 is the golden rule, which doesn't read, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. But it says to do to others what you would want done to you. Now let's look at some reasons why we need Good Samaritans out there. Worldwide, there are 1.2 billion people living in various states of hunger and malnutrition. In the U.S., over 400,000 in greater Philadelphia face poverty. 40% of the children in New York City live in poverty. 32 million Americans live below the government's poverty line. 4 million Americans live on the streets. I often hear horror stories about kids in high schools. We've had kids who actually sleep on the buses or sleep in the woods and come to school. Often their lunch is the only meal they get all day long. There is so much opportunity for us as Good Samaritans out there, it isn't funny. And yet we often turn a blind eye to the need that is truly out there. It is is estimated that 153 million children worldwide, ranging from infants to teenagers, have lost one or both of their parents. HIV is tearing families apart out there. Over 7 million children are in institutional care worldwide. And we're just asking you to think about taking in one. 19,000 children under the age of 5 die every year or every day in 2011. And children suffer from domestic violence everywhere, on every continent, in every city, in every small town, there is domestic violence happening. But we often don't see it. We often don't think about it. We often don't get involved. Sometimes we rationalize about getting involved, thinking that we really don't have the talent to be involved. But I guarantee you, if you have parenting skills, you have so much more than those children who don't have any parents could ever be looking for. You have the ability, you have the time, you have the opportunity, but you have to make the decision. And I understand not everybody can, but there are lots of people who are able to do so. Agape's goal. Our goal is to partner with Good Samaritans across North Carolina in getting involved. We want you to paint a Picasso. The artist does not see life as a problem to be solved, but as a medium for creation. Dorothy Wayers, In the Mind of the Maker. Every child is that medium for creation. So let me go ahead and offer the invitation. I love telling this story because it involves one of my kids, and I often use it as an invitation. I was kidding with one of my kids one time, and I said to them, Kimmy, do you know how much more money I would have if I hadn't adopted all 4 of you? And my daughter, who is 17 now, doesn't miss a beat. She said, Dad, if you hadn't adopted us, you wouldn't have had a life. And it's true. It's true. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to watch my children grow up. Wouldn't have the opportunity to play games with them. Wouldn't have had the opportunity to see them succeed in life, make mistakes in life, and eventually give me grandchildren. That's what I'm looking for. But you know what? I would like to suggest to you that if you're not a Christian, Jesus is the way to have a great life. If you're not a Christian, you maybe not understand that Jesus gives you the way to succeed, to be happy, to enjoy life in a way that a non-Christian never can. The opportunity to grow old with faith, with the ability to see an end in sight and not be afraid when that end comes. We give you that opportunity to come forward and express that faith and be united with Him in baptism as we stand and sing.